Hello，大家好，又係我高 B 哥啊！係時間提醒大家飲水啦，增添智慧，增添水分，智慧如水啊！好啦，嚟到錄片時間啦，2025年嘅8月7號啊！呢一個咧係第2節啊嚇，因為咧實在太過精彩啦。高 B 哥咧頭先咧第1節嗰度咧就已經同大家講解咗點解咧高 B 哥要同大家咧分享呢一條嘅影片啊。咁咧陳啟宗咧真係咧做一個好好嘅示範，點樣咧去應付咧呢個西方嘅記者、西方嘅提問咧？有陣時咧我都發覺咧中國咧暫時仲未適應。咁啊近排咧就有個咧就姓高嘅係咪？咁啊跟住咧佢已經係影得唔錯，但係咧嗰個氣勢咧，始終都係唔夠啊陳啟宗嚟。咁啊，陳啟宗咧做咗好好嘅示範。咁啊，內容咧亦都係非常之咁精彩噶。咁啊，未睇第1節嘅咧，睇翻第1節啦嚇。而家咧就嚟到第2節。咁啊，第2節裏邊咧，兩個記者咧輪流去發問。咁啊，你會見到咧，啲記者咧越問咧就越冇信心。啊，預備咗嘅問題咧，諗住咧就挑戰陳啟宗、挑戰中國㗎。點知咧一咧都俾陳啟宗咧用呢個事實咧打翻落去嘅。咁所以咧大家咧可以咧參考下呢個做法。OK， 而家去片啦。
Let's change a little bit the topic. For a country that claims the word social in its state's doctrine, social issues appear somewhat absent from Chinese policy imaginations of great power status.
What do you mean by social?
Social to behave in a socialistic way.
They are not behaving in a socialistic way?
That's my question. President Xi also vowed that China would be making greater contributions to mankind in the coming years. So what could this be?
Well, as I mentioned to you, some Chinese movie will likely win the Oscar one of these days. So that would be a contribution.
One.
I listened to Daniel Barenboim with Dr. Paulson the other day, and I saw him over breakfast the next morning at the same hotel. I almost went up to him and asked, have you heard of a young pianist by the name of Wang Yujia? Any of you have heard of the pianist by the name of Wang Yujia? No? You will. She records for Deutsche Grammophon. She was a Gilmore Young Artist recipient 2012 or something like that. So you will be hearing these names. There is a student of mine in Berlin by the name of Ning Feng who is a violinist. Last time I heard him play was in the Rathaus here in Hamburg when Helmut Schmidt was there. And the then premier of China, Wen Jiabao, was there. So they will contribute in many, many ways.
But these now you are telling about cultural or art or music. I mean, there are still other. It's beautiful and necessary, absolutely. But there are still other great responsibilities, and
such as
making the world a better one.
Good.
Doing your part to have a clean environment.
Good.
Respect things you're not respecting, perhaps up to now in China.
Okay. Let's take some of those as an example.
Yeah.
Who have been more contributing to African nations in the last 20 years? The Europeans were colonialists. In the old days, I made a mistake of saying to the king of Belgium one time, I used the word Congo. The Chinese just traded with Africa. They have their problem, I know that. Especially the private companies. The state-owned enterprises are far better, by the way. And so the model of economic development that China has just underwent in the last 30 years, in my opinion and that of many economists, is far more akin to the condition of many developing economies, such as in Africa and in other parts of the world. And so China can be a great model for a lot of these economies to learn from.
For the African economies?
Yes, or in poorer economies in general. You talk about the green, the environmental issue. In 1974, when I was entering MBA school, as you mentioned, Nora, I was in Southern California, Claremont Graduate University, and I was driving up the hill. I cannot see the hill in front of me, because in 1973-74, Los Angeles was such a disaster in the environment. I have photograph here, 1952, London. Remember that? People have to wear masks on the street. So 1952, Britain. 1972, 73, Los Angeles. Now you have 2017, China. Economic development will produce a lot of terrible effects to the environment unless you are really enlightened. But it's not enough to be enlightened. You also need money. George Shultz asked me, George Shultz, the former Secretary of State of Ronald Reagan, asked me maybe 15 years ago, how come China does not build electric cars? All electric cars. I said, good, wonderful idea. 20 years ago, China does not have the technology even for combustion cars, let alone electric cars. So I said, George, if you want China to do that, who's going to pay? 20 years ago, China was poor. You want them to build all electric cars, and at that time, electric cars are not as efficient as it is today. Are you willing to pay? I shut them up. If the West want China to take care of the environment when they were still poor, who's going to pay? Now, let me tell you something also. Today, I can assure you, the leaders in Beijing are far more enlightened than the leaders in Washington, D.C. concerning the environment. Now, let me tell you something also. Let me tell you also something. You know the U.S. Green Building Council? They take care of building, make sure that they are green, right? Mm-hmm. The first shopping center that has gold standard of U.S. Green Building Council, what country is it in? China.
Does it start with a C? Yes.
Second one, China. Third one, China. Fourth, fifth, sixth, China. The fact that they're all done by my company is coincidental, okay?
I think that point is definitely taken, Ronnie. But let's come back to the sort of with great power comes great responsibility thing. You talked a lot about the environment and what China does to protect it. A different issue that comes to mind is migration, which is a global concern. Now, could you imagine that China takes in refugees from, say, Syria or other parts of the Middle East, or even closer to home, maybe from Myanmar? Is that an issue where China could also show responsibility?
First of all, I'm not sure if anybody has asked. Why don't you try?
So if they did, what would be China's response?
I don't know. But I do know history. 1,000 years ago, there were tens of thousands of Jews, at that time refugees. Where did they end up? Nobody took them. China did. 500 years ago, there were 300,000 Arabs in southern China. What did China do to them? Welcome them. In fact, sorry to mention this, but in Second World War, when the Jews were persecuted in this country, the Brits did not take them. They traveled all the way to Hong Kong. They met British colony, don't accept them. They went to Shanghai, China took them. The first place that somebody will take the Jewish refugee was China.
So that's an historical example, and that's much appreciated. But let's talk about the present.
That's why I suggest you ask them if they would take them. Mm. Because China is very big. China is the most populated country in the world. Will they accept? I don't know. I know what your country would do. I don't know what China would do.
What would you advise China to do?
Depends on the situation. Hypothetical questions are not as meaningful.
Still.
I don't know. I really don't know the answer. So all I can do is tell you what history has been.
The title of these discussions is The World in Disorder or World Order Under Pressure. And I think there's enormous amount of uncertainty regarding the current world order. But there are some things perhaps we can agree on. One is China has arrived or is in the process of arriving on the great power stage. The second is the Western-dominated order is changing, is in crisis, possibly crumbling. Do you see a relation between the 2 points? Is perhaps one point favoring the other one?
What do you mean by 1 point?
The second one of the Western world in disorder, making the role of China on the international scene even bigger than it was possible before.
Whether the West is in disorder or not, the rise of a big country like China, no choice, will change the world order. You don't need to intentionally change anything. Your presence will change everything. Today's trade of China is about the same as that of the United States. So the two of them has trade of what? 4 trillion, 5 trillion a piece, import, export, add together. And so, you know, when you are that big, you will change the world whether you like it or not. The answer rather, the question rather is the rest of the world willing to accept that 1.4 billion people want to better their livelihood? Is that legitimate? So the question should not be addressed to me. The question should be addressed to ladies and gentlemen in the audience.
What is your impression? How is the West reacting to this rise of China and to its will to play, apparently, a new role on the political scene?
I have my worries. And the reason is the following. The West have been strong for the last 400 years, 500 years, since Renaissance. And China has been waning for the last 200-300 years. And it is never easy to accept a new player. And today, the West is very ideological. In particular, sorry, Thomas, Germany. I talked to journalists from Süddeutsche, Frankfurter Gemeinde, and the French, wherever. No other journalists are as ideological as that of the German newspaper that I know. I never talked to Der Spiegel, but maybe you're better.
No, we're not at all.
But whatever it is, you know, let me tell you this. I'll answer it this way. I was in Frankfurt. I was in Hamburg one time, and Angela Merkel was speaking, and 4 or 5 times in her speech, she said, "Shared value." Shared value. Helmut Schmidt was sitting on stage with her. I was sitting on the first few rows. I raised my hand to ask a question when it's Q&A time. Of course, they would not pick a Chinaman. So I was not picked. But let me tell you what my question was. And I told Helmut Schmidt later. I said, my question was, Chancellor Merkel, you keep using the word shared value. I live in China. Am I supposed to share your value? By saying so, now no one is suggesting that you should give up your value. By all means, keep your good value. But by saying so, you draw a line on the sand. I am on this side, you may be on the other side. If you don't share my value, you are not one of my own. Keep your value, but why say it? By saying it, you are dividing the world. good as
Later
the...
on, I think we will speak about the Chinese policy to impose values or to have a free discussion in
We
Europe.
never impose it outside of our border.
Yeah,
You
I
do.
don't know.
You do.
Yes.
The West do. Can you learn not to impose your value on other countries?
But perhaps there were values to share.
Ronnie, talking about values, imposing values, let's look at the role that the US is currently playing, a country that you said is among the most self-righteous countries in world history. At the same time, what we see in Washington right now is a pullback from Washington's international responsibility as the leader of the free world. You spend a lot of time in the US yourself. You're engaged in a lot of think tank activities in the US. What is your sense? Where does Washington stand these days? And also, how is that stature perceived in Beijing, for that matter?
First of all, let's not blame Donald Trump for everything. He should be blamed for many things, but not everything. Isolationism in America did not start with Donald Trump. In fact, I asked the following question. All of you know the origin of the United States, 1776 and so forth. Was America founded on internationalization, or was it founded on isolationism?
Yeah.
Think about it. What's Monroe Doctrine? Right? 1820-some. All those tells us that America from day one is an isolationism country, not an internationalism country. The fact that you and I live our whole life in the post-World War II era, where America was originally reluctantly pulled into the international scene, does not mean that America historically was an internationalism country. In fact, roughly only 1/3 of its history, particularly after dragged into the Second World War, is the United States, an internationalist. So for America to go back to isolationism should not surprise any of us. And no other country that I can think of can survive as an isolated country. The United States is the only one. Somebody said, oh, maybe Russia can. I said, no, Russia cannot. Russia may not need to import anything, but it needs to export gas, natural gas. So even Russia cannot be totally isolationist and survive. The only country that I can think of is the United States. 2 oceans on 2 sides, small Canada on the north, Mexico in the south, not a threat to Russia, to the United States economically or militarily. So America can easily go back to isolationism. And I do worry that America has that tendency always. And so let's not be too surprised if America moved toward isolationism. I don't like it. But what can I do? And I do fear that America, especially now with Trump in the White House, may be moving the country further in isolationism, which I don't think is necessarily good for the world.
And that means that China has to take on more responsibility, fill that vacuum.
Well, China never want to be number one because China always was number one for 3,000 years. Then the last 200 years become number nothing. A couple thousand British soldiers took over China. In Shanghai, where my mother grew up, in Shanghai, in the parks, there's a sign that says, no dogs and Chinese. This is in your home. What would you like, Britta? You go home, in your bedroom, there's a sign that says, no dogs in Britta. That's exactly what the colonialists did to China. And so, China has this terrible history of the last couple hundred years of under oppression by the West. 22,000 soldiers in 1900, 8 nations defeated the whole of China, from Europeans mostly, except the United States. So China is today just want to be back to the global scene as a responsible and respected member of the international community. How much responsibility you want them to take? It depends. So far, they are the most business-oriented country that I know. They try to keep the hand off all the politics and so forth. Middle East, they try to get out of it. They don't want to touch it, right? Do you want China to take more responsibility? If you do, then let me assure you, somebody will say, see, China is overextended itself, it exerting its influence around the world. So the Chinese say, to hell with it. No win situation, we just do what we want to do.
Those who are visiting China these days and even if they can't read Mandarin, they have to consider that there are a lot of books and written works on the end of the West. Would you subscribe to this theory? Are we already living in a kind of post-Western order?
Not at all. You cannot prevent somebody from being foolish, especially on the internet. You have foolish people in this country. China has tons of it, just that they have many times more people.
You wouldn't agree
that's
on
all.
that. We're not a system yet.